Most people think motivation comes from positive thinking and self-help mantras, but they're completely wrong. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in ancient Rome, woke up every morning dreading his day, yet he built an empire and wrote philosophy that still changes lives 2,000 years later. He discovered 5 counterintuitive morning principles that create unshakable motivation by embracing resistance, not avoiding it. These ancient secrets can transform your mornings from a battle against the snooze button into a powerful ritual that makes you unstoppable. And I'm about to reveal exactly how the Stoics engineered their minds to wake up with purpose every single day. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your like and comment which part of the world you're watching from, because now I'm going to tell you everything. Have you ever felt that crushing resistance when your alarm pierces through your dreams at 6 in the morning? Your hand fumbles to silence it, and for that brief moment you lie there with a choice: rise to meet the day or surrender to the warm embrace of your bed. That familiar weight of resistance presses down on you, the same weight that keeps millions trapped in a cycle of snooze buttons, rushed mornings, and regret. Just 5 more minutes, you tell yourself, knowing full well it's the same bargain you made yesterday. And yesterday's 5 minutes became 30, and your carefully planned morning routine collapsed into a chaotic rush out the door. You're not alone in this daily battle. According to research from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine, over 57% of people report regularly struggling with morning motivation, with the average person hitting the snooze button at least twice before finally getting up. But what if the problem isn't your alarm clock, your sleep schedule, or even your willpower? What if it's your entire approach to motivation? Most morning routines fail because they're built on a fundamental misunderstanding of human motivation. We've been taught that motivation comes first, then action. But the Stoics, ancient philosophers with surprisingly modern insights, discovered the opposite is true. Consider Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, arguably one of the most powerful men in ancient history. You might imagine he leapt from bed each morning, eager to rule his vast empire. The reality? He struggled just like you do. In his private journals, later published as Meditations, he wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for? Or is this what I was created for? To huddle under the blankets and stay warm?" Marcus wasn't naturally motivated every morning. He had to talk himself into getting up, just like you do. The difference wasn't in his natural motivation levels, it was in his philosophy of motivation. Epictetus, another prominent Stoic philosopher, was born a slave before gaining his freedom and becoming one of the most influential teachers of his era. Despite physical disability and having experienced extreme hardship, he developed a powerful approach to daily motivation. First, say to yourself what you would be, he taught, and then do what you have to do. The Stoics weren't superhuman. They were real people who developed practical techniques to overcome the same resistance you feel when that alarm sounds. Their approach wasn't about eliminating the struggle, but about embracing it as part of a meaningful life. Modern research confirms what the Stoics intuited. According to a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, people who wait for motivation before acting accomplish significantly less than those who act despite initial reluctance. The study found that successful people don't experience less resistance. They've just developed better strategies for working with it rather than against it. This brings us to the counterintuitive truth about morning motivation. Resistance isn't your enemy. It's your compass. The activities that offer the greatest reward often come with the greatest initial resistance. By learning to navigate this resistance rather than avoid it, you transform your relationship with mornings entirely. Let me ask you something right now. Think about the last time you forced yourself to get up despite not feeling like it. How did you feel an hour later? In almost every case, the resistance completely disappears once you're in motion. This is what the Stoics understood. The obstacle is not in the action itself, but in the transition to action. The Stoic approach offers something more valuable than fleeting motivation. It provides a framework for sustainable action regardless of how you feel. Rather than chasing the perfect morning routine, the Stoics built morning practices that acknowledge the reality of resistance while providing practical tools to move through it. Let's talk about the first of these powerful practices, what I call the memento mori morning trigger. When your alarm sounds tomorrow morning before moving a muscle, spend 20 seconds contemplating this truth. This day is not guaranteed. Imagine, as Marcus Aurelius did each morning, that this could be your final day alive. How would you approach your morning if you knew with certainty these were your final hours? This practice sounds dark at first. I certainly thought so when I began implementing it. But neuroscience explains why it works so effectively. Your brain is wired with what psychologists call loss aversion, meaning the pain of losing something motivates you more powerfully than the pleasure of gaining something. A study in the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience found that visualizing the loss of opportunity creates stronger motivation than visualizing potential rewards. Try this right now. Close your eyes for just 10 seconds and imagine that you've just been told you have only 1 month left to live. Really feel it. What changes immediately about your priorities? What suddenly seems trivial that you were stressing about yesterday? This shift in perspective is what the memento mori trigger creates every morning. When your alarm rings, before reaching for your phone, simply say to yourself, "I have been given another day of life, a gift that will eventually run out. How will I use these hours?" Thomas, one of my clients, was perpetually exhausted and unmotivated in the morning. After implementing the memento mori trigger for just 5 days, he reported, "It's strange, but contemplating that I might not have tomorrow actually makes getting out of bed easier. The resistance is still there, but it no longer controls my decisions." Right now, take 10 seconds to set a reminder on your phone with this question to read first thing tomorrow morning. If this were my last day, would I spend it hitting snooze? The second Stoic practice addresses the root cause of morning procrastination, the unexpected discomfort that derails your intentions. I call this the premeditatio resistance ritual, based on the Stoic exercise of premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Here's how it works. Each evening, spend 60 seconds visualizing in vivid detail the specific resistance you'll face the next morning. Feel the warmth of your bed, the heaviness in your limbs, the thoughts that will tempt you to delay. Then, mentally rehearse moving through this resistance step by step. Seneca advised, "The soul should know beforehand all the troubles of humankind, and all that is accidental should be anticipated in the soul. I am ready for all emergencies." Modern psychology confirms the power of this approach. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that implementation intentions, specific plans for overcoming obstacles, are up to 3 times more effective than simple goal setting. By mentally rehearsing your response to morning resistance, you're essentially programming your brain with an automatic response that bypasses willpower entirely. Sarah, a teacher and mother of 2, struggled for years with consistent mornings. I'd set alarms with the best intentions, but in the morning, my brain would come up with the most convincing arguments for staying in bed. After implementing the premeditatio resistance ritual for 2 weeks, she noticed a remarkable shift. Now, when those thoughts come, it's like they've lost their power. I've already seen them coming and decided how I'll respond. Tonight, before bed, try this abbreviated version. Close your eyes and vividly imagine tomorrow morning's resistance. Feel the comfort of your bed. Hear the thoughts that will tempt you to delay. Then, Mentally rehearse placing your feet on the floor immediately when your alarm sounds, regardless of how you feel. Visualize each specific action that follows. The third Stoic secret addresses the paralysis of choice that often derails mornings. I call it the first action momentum principle, derived from Epictetus's teaching to make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens. Modern neuroscience has discovered what the Stoics intuited. Decision fatigue depletes willpower. A study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that the simple act of making decisions progressively depletes our mental energy throughout the day. This is why successful people like Steve Jobs wore the same outfit daily, to eliminate unnecessary decisions. The Stoic solution is elegantly simple. Identify one non-negotiable first action that requires minimal decision-making. This becomes your momentum trigger that initiates a cascade of productive behavior. For Marcus Aurelius, this was his morning journaling practice. For you, it might be making your bed, drinking a glass of water, or completing 5 push-ups. The specific action matters less than its simplicity and consistency. Michael, an entrepreneur who struggled with chaotic mornings, implemented this principle by placing a glass of water by his bedside each night. My only job when the alarm goes off is to sit up and drink the entire glass of water. That's it. But something amazing happens once I complete that one simple action. I'm already up, already moving, and the next steps happen almost automatically. Neurologically, this works because of what scientists call behavioral momentum, the tendency for behavior in progress to continue. By focusing exclusively on initiating one simple action rather than an entire routine, you bypass the overwhelm that triggers procrastination. For tomorrow morning, identify your one non-negotiable first action. Something so simple it would be almost embarrassing not to do it. Write it on a note card and place it where you'll see it first thing. Commit only to this action, knowing that momentum will naturally carry you forward. The fourth Stoic practice addresses the negative emotional spiral that often begins within seconds of waking. I call this the amor fati morning reframe, based on the Stoic concept of amor fati, the love of fate or finding opportunity in whatever circumstances arise. When you wake to an early alarm, cold weather, or a packed schedule, your initial reaction creates an emotional tone that can persist for hours. The Stoic alternative is to immediately reframe every circumstance as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. Epictetus taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." This isn't positive thinking. It's pragmatic reframing that focuses on advantage rather than disadvantage. A Harvard Business School study found that this type of cognitive reframing significantly reduces stress hormones and improves problem-solving ability, particularly during morning hours when cortisol levels are naturally elevated. In practice, it works like this. When faced with any morning circumstance, immediately ask, "How is this an advantage?" If your alarm feels too early, reframe, "This gives me time before the world gets noisy." If it's raining, reframe, "Perfect weather for focus and depth." If you're tired, reframe, "An opportunity to practice discipline when it's not easy." Elena, a medical resident working grueling shifts, transformed her morning experience with this practice. "I used to curse my 4:30 alarm. Now I immediately think, while others sleep, I get a head start on becoming the doctor I want to be." Same early hour, completely different emotional experience. Try this right now. Think of your most common morning complaint. Pause the video and write down 3 ways this very circumstance could actually be an advantage. This trains your brain to automatically find opportunity where others see only obstacles. The final and perhaps most powerful Stoic morning practice addresses the fundamental question, why get up at all? I call this the protreptic purpose practice, based on the ancient Greek concept of protreptic discourse, speech that turns a person toward a greater purpose. Modern research consistently shows that purpose is a stronger motivator than pleasure. A University of Pennsylvania study found that people who connected their morning activities to a meaningful purpose reported 40% higher energy levels and 65% greater persistence when faced with challenges. The Stoics formalized this connection through morning reflection on their roles and responsibilities. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, 'I am rising to do the work of a human being.'" This practice involves defining your morning not by activities, but by purpose, asking not what you'll do, but whom you'll serve, and what values you'll express through your actions. David, a software engineer who struggled with consistent mornings, transformed his relationship with waking up through this practice. Instead of thinking about my morning routine as a series of tasks, I now ask myself, who needs me to show up today? Thinking about my team, my family, and the users of our product gives me a reason to get up that's bigger than just checking boxes. Implementation is straightforward. Create a purpose statement that connects your morning to something larger than yourself. Write it on a card by your bedside to read immediately upon waking. Your statement might be as simple as, "I rise today to serve my family through my strength," or "I get up to create work that matters to people who need it." These 5 Stoic practices, the Memento Mori trigger, the Premeditatio resistance ritual, the first action momentum principle, the Amor Fati morning reframe, and the protreptic purpose practice, form a complete system for transforming your morning experience. They don't rely on feeling motivated. They create motivation through philosophical action. But there exists a technique that transformed the mornings of a Roman slave into moments of extraordinary mental power. When Epictetus revealed this to his students, many were shocked by its simplicity. It involves a single question you need to ask yourself within the first 30 seconds after opening your eyes. The question that Epictetus asked himself every morning was simple yet profound. What is within my control today? This single inquiry, practiced at dawn before facing the world, transformed a man born in chains into one of history's greatest teachers of freedom. And it's precisely this distinction that can transform your relationship with anxiety, disappointment, and frustration forever. Let me tell you about Epictetus. Born into slavery around 55 AD, he suffered a physical disability. Some accounts suggest his leg was broken by his master and never healed properly. Yet despite these circumstances that would crush most spirits, he developed a philosophy so powerful that even emperors sought his wisdom. How? By mastering one fundamental distinction that most of us never learn. Epictetus understood something revolutionary. Our suffering comes not from events themselves, but from our reactions to them. Make the best use of what is in your power, he taught, and take the rest as it happens. This wasn't positive thinking or wishful optimism. It was a practical framework for maintaining sanity in an unpredictable world. The core of this framework is what philosophers call the dichotomy of control, a simple but life-changing division of everything you experience into 2 categories: things that are up to you and things that are not. Imagine drawing a circle inside another circle. The inner circle contains everything you can control: your judgments, your attitudes, your own actions and responses. The outer circle holds everything you cannot: other people's opinions, the weather, the economy, the past, and countless other externals. Most of us spend our lives in exactly the wrong way, investing enormous emotional energy trying to control things in the outer circle while neglecting our absolute power over the inner circle. Have you noticed how much time you spend worrying about things completely outside your influence? The meeting that might go badly tomorrow, the traffic that might make you late, the response to that text message you sent hours ago, I want you to try something right now. Pause the video, grab a piece of paper, and draw 2 concentric circles. In the inner circle, list 3 things causing you stress that are fully within your control. In the outer circle, list 3 things causing you stress that are beyond your control. Take 30 seconds to do this. Welcome back. Now look at your outer circle. For each item you wrote, ask yourself, what aspect of this situation can I control? For example, if you wrote, my boss's mood, you can't control that. But you can control how you prepare for meetings, how you communicate, and how you respond when your boss is in a bad mood. This exercise reveals something critical. While we cannot control the outer circle, we can always control how we respond to it. As Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps and later developed a psychological approach deeply aligned with Stoicism, famously wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." This is exactly what Epictetus meant when he taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Despite being enslaved, a condition where almost nothing external was within his control, he discovered complete freedom in the one domain where he had absolute authority, his own mind. Here's where modern research confirms what the Stoics intuited. Studies in cognitive behavioral therapy show that people who focus on aspects of situations they can influence experience significantly less stress and achieve better outcomes than those who ruminate on uncontrollable factors. A landmark study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that this locus of control orientation is one of the strongest predictors of both psychological well-being and practical success. But knowing this intellectually isn't enough. We need practical methods to implement this distinction in real time, especially when emotions run high. This is where the paradox of control reveals itself. The more you focus exclusively on what you can control, the more influence you actually develop over what you cannot directly control. Let me share a story about Sophia, one of my coaching clients. Sophia was devastated after being unexpectedly laid off from her dream job during company restructuring. For the first week, she obsessed over questions like, "Why me?" and "How could they do this?" She ruminated on the unfairness and replayed conversations with her former boss, all things in the outer circle, completely beyond her control. When we started working together, I introduced her to the dichotomy of control. We drew the circles, and she realized she'd been investing all her emotional energy in the uncontrollable outer circle. Together, we redirected her focus entirely to her inner circle, her skill development, her networking efforts, her daily routine, her attitude toward interviews. Within 3 weeks, she had more promising job leads than she'd ever had before. Within 6 weeks, she had 2 offers, both better than her previous position. The paradox played out perfectly. By completely releasing what she couldn't control and mastering what she could, she ultimately gained more influence over her circumstances. This brings us to a practical application for your daily life, the 24-hour test. Whenever you find yourself anxious about something, ask, will this matter in 24 hours, 24 months, 24 years? This temporal perspective immediately helps you distinguish between what deserves your emotional investment and what doesn't. Most of what we stress about fails this test dramatically. That comment someone made in a meeting, likely forgotten in 24 hours. The traffic that made you 10 minutes late, irrelevant in 24 days. Even that presentation you're nervous about, probably won't matter in 24 months, let alone years. This doesn't mean these things aren't important in the moment. It means your emotional response to them should be proportional to their actual significance in your life's bigger picture. The Stoics were masters at maintaining this perspective. Marcus Aurelius, ruling an empire with countless daily crises, reminded himself, "Remember how long you've been putting this off, how many extensions the gods gave you, and you didn't use them. Let's put this into practice with a simple daily ritual I call the Control Journal. Each morning, identify 3 specific things within your control that, if focused on exclusively, would make the biggest positive difference in your day. These become your anchors. Regardless of what else happens, you'll maintain your grip on these controllable elements. Conversely, identify one thing you're likely to worry about today that's completely outside your control. Write it down, then deliberately practice releasing it. Visualize placing it in the outer circle and consciously redirecting your energy to your inner circle priorities. A client once told me this practice alone reduced his anxiety by over 50% in just 2 weeks. I realized I was spending most of my mental energy on things I couldn't influence, he said. Just becoming aware of that pattern was transformative. Now let's address a common misconception. Focusing on what you can control doesn't mean becoming passive about external circumstances. Quite the opposite. It means engaging with them more effectively by directing your energy precisely where it can make a difference. Consider a difficult conversation you need to have with someone. You cannot control how they'll respond, their mood that day, or their willingness to listen. But you absolutely can control your preparation, your choice of words, your tone, your listening skills, and your emotional management during the conversation. By focusing exclusively on these controllable elements, you dramatically increase the likelihood of a positive outcome, without the anxiety that comes from trying to control the uncontrollable. This brings us to a crucial point, recognizing when you're slipping into the outer circle. Here are 3 clear signs. You're using phrases like they should, they need to, or they have to. You're replaying past events and rewriting them in your mind. You're feeling anxious about outcomes rather than focused on processes. When you catch yourself in these patterns, use what I call the circle reset, a 3-step process for returning to your inner circle of control. First, pause and take a deep breath, creating that vital space between stimulus and response. Second, explicitly name what you cannot control in this situation. Simply stating, "I cannot control their reaction," creates immediate mental clarity. Third, identify the specific aspect you can control and direct your full attention there. I can control how thoroughly I prepare, or I can control my own response to criticism. This reset technique works in virtually any situation, from traffic jams to difficult meetings to family conflicts. With practice, you'll find yourself automatically distinguishing between what you can and cannot control, often before anxiety even takes hold. The freedom this creates is extraordinary. Imagine moving through your day with complete clarity about where to invest your energy. Imagine the stress that dissolves when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable. Imagine the effectiveness you develop when your efforts are perfectly aligned with your actual sphere of influence. This is exactly what Epictetus discovered despite his enslavement. That true freedom comes not from controlling external circumstances, but from mastering our responses to them. Freedom, he taught, is not procured by a full enjoyment of what is desired, but by controlling the desire. As we conclude this chapter, I want you to try one final exercise. Think about the single external circumstance that's causing you the most stress right now. Take 10 seconds to really connect with that situation. Now, apply the dichotomy of control. What specific aspects of this situation can you influence? What aspects must you accept as beyond your control? How would your experience change if you invested all your energy in the former and released the latter? The dichotomy of control isn't just a philosophical concept, it's a practical tool that transforms how you experience every moment of your life. As you move through your day, continuously ask yourself, is this within my control? This simple question redirects your energy from frustration to effectiveness, from anxiety to action, from external battles to internal mastery. But now we come to something that scares many people when they first discover Stoicism, the premeditation of evils. The Stoics deliberately imagined the worst scenarios happening in their lives. This seems like madness until you understand why this practice of mental vaccination is perhaps the most powerful tool for eliminating anxiety. Have you noticed how your mind automatically jumps to the worst possible scenario? That important email you haven't received a reply to. Clearly they hated your proposal. That friend who didn't text back? Obviously they're upset with you. That slight pain in your side? Definitely a serious medical condition. Our minds are hardwired to catastrophize, to imagine the worst possible outcomes in vivid detail. Most self-help gurus tell you to fight this tendency. Think positive, they say. Visualize success. But the Stoics discovered something counterintuitive. Deliberately leaning into negative visualization is actually one of the most powerful tools for reducing anxiety and building resilience. This practice, what the Romans called premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils, might be the most misunderstood and yet transformative aspect of Stoic philosophy. Let me introduce you to Seneca, who, despite being one of the wealthiest men in Rome, regularly practiced voluntary poverty. Once a month, this advisor to emperors would dress in rags, sleep on the floor, and eat the simplest food possible. To outside observers, this looked absurd. Why would someone with unlimited luxury deliberately make himself uncomfortable? But Seneca wasn't practicing deprivation for its own sake. He was vaccinating himself against future misfortune. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with rough and coarse clothing, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" Seneca wrote. By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, he was rehearsing for potential hardship, proving to himself that he could handle it if necessary. This practice operates on a simple principle. Anxiety thrives on uncertainty and lack of preparation. When we deliberately face our fears in a controlled environment, they lose much of their power over us. It's like a mental vaccination, introducing a small, manageable dose of what frightens us to build immunity against the full disease. Modern neuroscience confirms the wisdom of this approach. When we repeatedly expose ourselves to feared scenarios in our imagination, the brain's fear response becomes desensitized. A study published in the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience found that this process, called exposure therapy, activates the prefrontal cortex, the rational part of our brain, which helps regulate the amygdala, our emotional alarm system. But how exactly do we practice this in our daily lives? I've developed what I call the 5-minute catastrophe practice. Here's how it works. Set a timer for 5 minutes and allow yourself to vividly imagine a specific fear or concern playing out in detail. Don't hold back. Let your mind explore the worst-case scenario completely. But, and this is crucial, when the timer ends, spend another 5 minutes identifying your available resources and potential responses to this situation. For example, imagine you're worried about giving an important presentation. During your catastrophe practice, visualize everything going wrong, forgetting your points, technology failing, the audience looking bored, even someone challenging you aggressively. Really feel the discomfort of that scenario. Then, when the timer switches to the response phase, systematically identify your resources, your preparation, your ability to adapt, your experience, supportive colleagues, backup materials. The magic happens in this second phase. By identifying specific responses to your worst fears, you're building what psychologists call response flexibility. The confidence that comes from knowing you have options regardless of what happens. This transforms vague anxiety into practical preparation. Let me show you how this transformed one of my clients' experiences. John struggled with severe social anxiety, that kept him from attending networking events crucial for his career. Instead of telling him to just think positive, I guided him through the catastrophe practice. For 5 minutes, he imagined walking into an event where no one talked to him, where he said something awkward, where he felt completely out of place. After fully experiencing this visualization, we switched to identifying his resources, conversation starters he could prepare, his genuine interest in others' work, his ability to ask thoughtful questions, and his option to take a short break if he felt overwhelmed. We also created a specific plan. If he found himself standing alone, he would approach someone else who was also alone and introduce himself with a question about their work. The result: the next event he attended wasn't perfect. He still felt nervous, but the anxiety no longer controlled him. The difference, he told me later, was that I wasn't afraid of the anxiety itself. I'd already experienced it in my mind and knew exactly what I would do when it appeared. This illustrates a key Stoic insight. It's not usually the feared situation itself that paralyzes us, but our fear of our own reaction to it. By rehearsing not just the challenge, but our response to it, we build confidence in our resilience. Now, there's an important distinction to make here. The catastrophe practice is not the same as the kind of negative rumination most of us do naturally. Productive anticipation has 3 specific characteristics. First, it's time-limited. You're not dwelling endlessly, but giving yourself a specific window to explore the fear. Second, it's detailed and specific rather than vague. What if my presentation fails? Is too general. What if my slides don't display properly and I forget my opening point? Gives you something concrete to prepare for. Third, and most importantly, it's always paired with response planning. Without this crucial second step, negative visualization can reinforce anxiety rather than reduce it. Let's try a simplified version right now. Think of something you're worried about in the coming week. Close your eyes for just 10 seconds and visualize one specific thing that could go wrong. Really see it happening. Now, with your eyes still closed, identify 2 specific actions you could take if that scenario actually occurred. Feel the sense of capability that comes from having a plan. What you just experienced is the essence of the Stoic approach to anxiety. Not avoiding negative possibilities, but systematically preparing for them. As Seneca wrote, "The man who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive." This practice integrates beautifully with mindfulness. In fact, you might think of it as mindfulness of difficulty, observing challenging scenarios with the same non-judgmental awareness you might bring to meditation. The key is to visualize these scenarios without becoming identified with them, watching them play out as if on a screen, rather than feeling completely immersed in them. Another powerful application of this approach is what I call the morning adversity scan. Each morning, take 30 seconds to ask yourself, what might go wrong today? Then identify your specific prepared responses. This brief practice essentially programs your mind to recognize challenges as opportunities to implement solutions rather than threats to avoid. I've found this particularly effective before meetings, presentations, or difficult conversations. By quickly visualizing potential challenges, the person who might raise objections, the question you might struggle to answer, and preparing specific responses, you enter the situation with a sense of readiness that no amount of positive thinking could provide. The philosopher Epictetus captured this perfectly when he said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters." The premeditation of difficulties is about ensuring you have responses ready for whatever happens. But how do you know if you're doing this productively rather than just worrying? The key difference is how you feel afterward. Productive negative visualization leaves you feeling more prepared and less anxious, while unproductive rumination increases anxiety without creating clarity. If you find yourself feeling worse after the practice, You're likely focusing too much on the catastrophe and not enough on your response capacity. This brings us to an important consideration: how to gradually build your negative visualization muscle. Start with smaller concerns before tackling your biggest fears. Just as you wouldn't begin a fitness program by trying to lift the heaviest weights, begin by practicing with moderate anxieties before addressing profound ones. For example, before visualizing losing your job, practice visualizing a minor work setback. Before contemplating serious illness, practice visualizing managing a common cold. This progressive approach builds your capacity for constructive engagement with fear without overwhelming your coping resources. The evening reflection pairs perfectly with this morning practice. At night, ask yourself, what challenges did I face today and how did I respond? What did I learn that can strengthen my responses tomorrow? This creates a continuous improvement loop that builds resilience over time. Now let's address a common misconception. The goal of negative visualization isn't to make you pessimistic. Quite the opposite. By preparing for difficulties, you create the psychological safety to be optimistic. When you know you can handle the worst, you're free to hope for the best without naivety. This is what the Stoics called the reserve clause, pursuing positive outcomes while maintaining inner acceptance of whatever actually happens. Imagine applying this to something you're currently worried about. Take 5 seconds right now to think of that concern. Now, instead of trying not to worry about it, which never works anyway, give yourself permission to fully explore it, but with the intention of identifying your specific response options. Feel the shift from vague anxiety to concrete preparation. This perspective transforms how you view challenges entirely. The job interview becomes an opportunity to demonstrate your preparation. The difficult conversation becomes a chance to practice emotional regulation. Even illness becomes an occasion to develop patience and appreciation for health. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This is the essence of the Stoic approach, seeing obstacles not as things that prevent progress, but as the very path of growth itself. The practice of negative visualization creates what psychologists call anti-fragility, the quality of not just withstanding stress, but actually becoming stronger because of it. Unlike resilience, which is about returning to your original state after disruption, anti-fragility is about emerging better than before. You can start implementing this practice immediately with what I call the 3-level visualization. Before any challenging situation, quickly visualize. Level 1. What's likely to happen? The realistic scenario. Level 2. What could go wrong? The negative scenario. Level 3. How you'll specifically respond, your prepared responses. This 3-level approach ensures you're prepared for reality while ready for difficulties. The perfect balance of optimism and preparedness that characterizes Stoic wisdom. Remember, the goal isn't to eliminate all anxiety. That would be neither possible nor desirable. Anxiety in appropriate doses is a useful signal that helps us prepare. The goal is to transform anxious rumination into productive preparation, to move from being paralyzed by fears to being empowered by readiness. As we conclude this exploration of negative visualization, I invite you to select one concern that's been on your mind and schedule a specific 5-minute period today to practice the catastrophe technique, allowing yourself to fully visualize the difficulty and then systematically identifying your responses. You might be surprised at how quickly this practice can transform your relationship with anxiety. While the premeditation of difficulties strengthens your resilience against adversity, there exists another face of the Stoic coin equally transformative. When Epictetus taught his method for finding joy in any situation, his students initially thought it impossible. It involves a simple practice of redirecting attention that can transform even your worst days into opportunities for growth. You know that feeling when something goes completely wrong and you get stuck in frustration. Your car breaks down on the way to an important meeting. Your carefully planned vacation gets rained out. The project you poured your heart into receives harsh criticism. In these moments, most of us react in one of two ways. We either fight against reality, wishing things were different, or we resign ourselves to misery thinking, just my luck, or of course this would happen to me. But the Stoics discovered a third option, one so counterintuitive it initially sounds impossible. They called it amor fati, which translates to love of fate. Not just accepting what happens, but actually embracing it as if you had chosen it. As Nietzsche, inspired by Stoicism, later put it, not merely bear what is necessary, but love it. This isn't toxic positivity or forced optimism. It's a profound shift in how we relate to circumstances beyond our control. Marcus Aurelius, who suffered chronic illness while bearing the immense responsibilities of ruling Rome, wrote in his journal, "A cucumber is bitter? Throw it away. There are briars in the path? Turn aside. That is enough. Do not add, and why were such things made in the world?" Notice what he's doing here. He's not pretending the cucumber isn't bitter or the path isn't thorny. He's acknowledging reality exactly as it is, without adding the extra suffering that comes from believing things should be otherwise. But the Stoics went even further, finding opportunities within adversity. When Marcus fell ill, instead of lamenting his condition, he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He transformed his illness into an opportunity to practice patience, to develop mental clarity despite physical discomfort, to demonstrate to others how to bear suffering with dignity. This is the crucial difference between passive resignation and active acceptance. Resignation says, "This is terrible, but I can't do anything about it." Amor fati says, "This has happened, and now I'll find how to use it to my advantage." It's the difference between being dragged by fate and dancing with it. Let me show you how this works in practice through a simple exercise I call the Advantage Journal. Whenever you face a setback or unwanted circumstance, challenge yourself to find at least 3 potential advantages or opportunities hidden within it. These can be lessons to learn, skills to develop, or unexpected benefits that might emerge. Try this right now. Think of a recent frustration or disappointment you experienced. Maybe a delayed flight, a rejection, or a technical failure. Now, take 30 seconds to write down 3 possible advantages that could come from this situation. I'll wait. Welcome back. This might have been challenging at first, but with practice, it becomes second nature. One of my clients faced a 2-hour traffic delay on his way to work. Initially furious, he practiced the advantage reframing. This gives me uninterrupted time to listen to that audiobook I've been meaning to finish. I can practice my patience, which I've been working on, and I'll have a perfect example to share with my team about adaptability when I teach the workshop next week. By the time he arrived at the office, his emotional state had completely transformed, not because the traffic disappeared, but because his relationship to it had changed. This reframing process follows 3 simple steps: observe, question, and reinterpret. First, observe the situation objectively, without judgment. "I'm stuck in traffic," rather than "this traffic is ruining my day." Second, question your initial interpretation. Is this really a purely negative event, or am I making assumptions? Finally, reinterpret the situation by asking, how might this actually benefit me? What opportunities does this present? The applications in modern life are endless. Your flight is delayed? Perfect time for undistracted reading or conversation with a stranger who might become a connection. Technology fails during your presentation? Opportunity to demonstrate your composure under pressure and connect more authentically with your audience. Plans cancelled last minute? unexpected gift of time you can use for something you've been postponing. The transformative question in any situation becomes, how could this be the best thing that could have happened? Not in some vague, wishful thinking way, but by identifying specific, concrete advantages that you can actively develop. This isn't just philosophical theory. Neuroscience confirms that this type of cognitive reframing literally creates new neural pathways in your brain. A study from Harvard revealed that consistently practicing reappraisal of negative events actually reduces activity in the amygdala, your brain's alarm system, while increasing activity in the prefrontal cortex, responsible for higher reasoning. In essence, you're training your brain to automatically seek advantage rather than threat. I witnessed this transformation with Anna, who suffered a serious injury that prevented her from continuing her career as a fitness instructor. Initially devastated, she began practicing amor fati daily, asking what opportunities this unwanted circumstance might contain. She discovered she could develop online content that reached people who couldn't access traditional fitness classes, those with mobility issues, busy parents, and people in remote areas. What seemed like career destruction became the catalyst for reaching 10 times more people than before her injury. The key is starting small. Don't wait for major catastrophes to practice amor fati. Begin with daily annoyances. The coffee shop that gets your order wrong, the colleague who interrupts you in meetings, the rain that ruins your hair. By consistently reframing these minor irritations, you're building the mental muscle to handle major challenges when they arrive. One particularly powerful way to integrate this practice is by combining it with gratitude. Instead of just identifying potential advantages, actively express gratitude for the challenging circumstance itself. This might seem impossible at first. How can you be grateful for something painful or difficult? The answer lies in recognizing that often, our greatest growth comes from our greatest challenges. Think about the most significant personal growth experiences in your life. Weren't many of them born from difficulty, disappointment, or even pain? The job loss that led to a better career path. The relationship ending that taught you what you truly need in a partner. The failure that revealed important weaknesses you needed to address. This reveals what I call the growth paradox. We want the results of growth without the discomfort that creates it. Amor fati resolves this paradox by welcoming the very circumstances that catalyze our development. This approach transforms not just our individual challenges, but our relationships as well. When a friend or partner does something that frustrates you, instead of immediately reacting, pause and ask, how might this difficulty be strengthening our relationship? What might I learn about myself from my reaction? What opportunity for communication does this create? I remember working with a couple on the brink of separation because of recurring conflicts. When they began applying amor fati to their disagreements, something remarkable happened. Instead of seeing arguments as evidence their relationship was failing, they reframed them as opportunities to understand each other more deeply. The frequency of conflicts didn't immediately decrease, but their relationship to those conflicts transformed entirely. Each disagreement became a chance to develop better communication skills and deeper intimacy. Epictetus captured this relational application perfectly when he said, "When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger." This isn't about excusing harmful behavior, but about finding the growth opportunity in every interaction. A practical way to develop this capacity is through what I call real-time reframing. When something unwanted occurs, give yourself 30 seconds to find the advantage before taking any action. This brief pause interrupts your automatic negative reaction and creates space for a more constructive response. For instance, when you receive critical feedback that initially stings, pause and ask, how is this precisely what I need to hear for my growth? What specific improvement might this lead to? How can I use this to strengthen rather than weaken my confidence? This 30-second investment transforms criticism from something to defend against into valuable data for your development. The Stoics understood something profound about human psychology. Our suffering comes less from events themselves and more from our judgment that they shouldn't be happening. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been." This doesn't mean pretending negative events are positive. It means recognizing that labeling events as good or bad is our interpretation, not an inherent quality of the events themselves, and we always have the power to choose interpretations that serve rather than sabotage us. Consider how this applies to everyday experiences. You're stuck in a long checkout line. Most people automatically label this bad and spend their waiting time feeding their frustration. The Amor Fati approach asks, how could this waiting be exactly what I need right now? Perhaps a moment to practice presence, to rest between activities, to observe human nature, or simply to breathe deeply when I'd otherwise be rushing. The most powerful application comes when facing truly difficult circumstances, illness, significant loss, or major disappointments. I'm not suggesting you should immediately feel joy about genuine hardship. Amor Fati isn't about bypassing authentic grief or difficulty. It's about asking, even in our darkest moments, given that this is my reality now, how will I use it? What might it eventually enable that wouldn't have been possible otherwise? Some of history's most remarkable contributions came from people who embraced precisely this perspective. Helen Keller's extraordinary impact came not despite her blindness and deafness, but in many ways because of them. Stephen Hawking's groundbreaking work continued not in spite of his physical condition, but partly enabled by the focused mental life it necessitated. Let's make this practical with a daily exercise. Each morning, identify one circumstance you're likely to face that day that you'd normally find frustrating or difficult. Proactively reframe it by writing 3 specific ways you could potentially benefit from it. This pre-framing trains your mind to automatically see opportunities in challenges before they even arise. The ultimate test of Amor Fati comes not in how we handle life's minor irritations, but in how we respond to its major disruptions. Can you look at the job loss, the health challenge, the unexpected move, or the ended relationship and genuinely ask, how might I one day look back on this as a pivotal moment that led to growth I couldn't have achieved any other way? This isn't about forced silver linings or toxic positivity. It's about the radical acceptance that what has happened is now part of your story, and you get to decide what role it plays, whether it becomes a source of perpetual frustration or a catalyst for unexpected development. As we develop this practice, we begin to recognize a profound truth. The quality of our lives is determined less by what happens to us and more by how we relate to what happens. 2 people can face identical circumstances with dramatically different experiences based solely on their relationship to those circumstances. Viktor Frankl, who survived Nazi concentration camps and developed a therapeutic approach deeply influenced by Stoic principles, observed that even in the most extreme conditions, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This is the essence of Amor Fati, not that we control what happens, but that we always control our relationship to what happens. And in that relationship lies our freedom. But to truly master the art of loving what happens, we need to understand another crucial dimension of Stoicism. When Seneca faced the possibility of losing everything, his wealth, status, and even his life, he turned to a simple exercise that completely transformed his perception of what really matters. This practice of voluntary subtraction reveals a surprising truth about what we actually need to be happy. Have you ever noticed how anxious you get when you lose access to something you consider essential? Your phone dies and that familiar panic sets in. Your internet goes down for an hour and suddenly you feel disconnected from the world. The coffee shop is out of your favorite drink, and your morning feels ruined. These small deprivations reveal something profound about our psychological dependence on comfort and convenience. Seneca, who served as advisor to emperors and was one of the wealthiest men in Rome, would regularly sleep on the hard floor and eat nothing but plain bread for days, voluntarily. Imagine that, a man who could afford every luxury, deliberately choosing discomfort. His friends thought he had lost his mind. Why would someone with access to the finest beds and most delicious foods in the empire choose to sleep on the ground and eat peasant food? They wondered. But Seneca wasn't practicing deprivation for its own sake. He was engaged in what the Stoics called premeditatio paupertatis, the premeditation of poverty. Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with rough and coarse clothing, he wrote, saying to yourself the while, "Is this the condition that I feared?" This practice wasn't about punishment or asceticism for moral reasons. It was a practical psychological exercise. By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, Seneca was inoculating himself against the fear of losing his comforts. He was discovering through direct experience that what he feared, loss of luxury, wasn't actually threatening to his well-being or happiness. Think about it. How much of your anxiety stems from the fear of losing something comfortable? Your job security, your relationship status, your social media validation, your morning routine. The Stoics recognized that constant comfort actually weakens us psychologically. Like muscles that atrophy without resistance, our mental resilience diminishes when we never experience discomfort. Let me introduce you to a simple practice I call the 24-hour challenge. Choose one comfort or convenience you regularly enjoy and voluntarily go without it for 24 hours. It could be something small like coffee, social media, or hot showers, or something more challenging like complaining, using your smartphone, or speaking, yes, a day of silence. The key is to approach this not as a punishment, but as an experiment. As you move through the day without your chosen comfort, observe your reactions with curiosity. Notice the urges that arise, the justifications your mind creates, the moments of discomfort, and most importantly, your capacity to function perfectly well despite the absence of something you thought you needed. But don't start with your most challenging dependencies. Begin with smaller discomforts before working your way up to bigger ones. If you've never practiced voluntary discomfort, giving up coffee might be a reasonable starting point. Trying to go 3 days without food when you've never even fasted for a morning would be setting yourself up for failure. The beauty of this practice is how immediately applicable it is to modern life. Consider intermittent fasting, now popular for health benefits, but essentially a form of voluntary discomfort the Stoics would have recognized. Digital detoxes, minimalism challenges, cold showers, all are modern versions of what Seneca was practicing 2,000 years ago. What happens in your brain during these experiences? Research shows that voluntary discomfort actually strengthens your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for willpower and decision-making. It's like weight training for your mind. Each time you voluntarily embrace discomfort, you're building neural pathways that make you more resilient when involuntary discomforts inevitably arise. I witnessed this transformation with a client who had become dependent on social validation. Every post, every message, every email triggered anxiety about how others would respond. We started with a simple practice: 24 hours without checking any likes, comments, or messages. Just one day of creating without consuming feedback. The first time he tried it, he reported physical symptoms of withdrawal, checking his phone unconsciously, feeling anxious about what he might be missing, worrying about not responding quickly enough. But by the third practice session, something had shifted. I realized I had been living in a constant state of low-grade anxiety, he told me, always wondering what others thought, always seeking approval. This one day of disconnection showed me I can exist peacefully without external validation. This raises an important distinction: productive discomfort versus harmful self-denial. The Stoic practice isn't about punishing yourself or adopting an ascetic lifestyle permanently. It's about strategic, temporary challenges that build specific psychological strengths. Fasting for 24 hours to develop resilience and gratitude is productive. Developing an eating disorder is harmful. The difference lies in your intention and approach. One aspect of this practice I particularly value is what I call the social silence component. When practicing voluntary discomfort, tell no one until after you've completed it. This prevents the exercise from becoming a performance for social validation, the very dependency many of us need to overcome. There's a world of difference between quietly challenging yourself to go without something and announcing to everyone, "I'm giving up social media for a week," before you've even begun. The integration with gratitude makes this practice even more powerful. Notice how after 24 hours without coffee, that first morning cup tastes transcendent. After a day without speaking, conversation becomes precious. After a week without restaurants, a simple home-cooked meal feels like a feast. This is the paradox of hedonic adaptation in reverse. By temporarily removing pleasures, we enhance our capacity to enjoy them when they return. I often reflect on how some of the happiest people I've met live with far fewer comforts than most of us consider essential. There's compelling research suggesting that beyond meeting basic needs, additional comforts and conveniences don't actually increase happiness, and may even decrease it by making us more dependent and less resilient. Consider creating your own progressive plan for voluntary discomfort. Start with one-day challenges that feel slightly uncomfortable but manageable. As you build confidence, extend to 2 days, then 3. Eventually, you might practice a full week without something you previously thought essential. Each experience builds upon the last, gradually expanding your comfort with discomfort. Imagine applying this to money worries. Many of us fear financial insecurity, but few deliberately practice living on less to prove to ourselves we could handle it if necessary. Try a week of spending only on absolute essentials. Cook every meal at home, avoid all impulse purchases, use only free entertainment. This isn't about saving money, though that's a nice side effect. It's about proving to yourself that your happiness doesn't depend on your spending power. Or consider relationship dependencies. Many stay in unfulfilling relationships from fear of being alone. A deliberate practice might be spending a weekend completely by yourself. No calls, no texts, no social interaction. Not as punishment, but as confirmation that you can be at peace in your own company. These practices reveal a profound truth. Most of our needs are actually preferences that we've mistaken for necessities. And this confusion causes tremendous suffering when circumstances inevitably change. As Epictetus said, wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Each time you practice voluntary discomfort, you're essentially saying to yourself, "This thing I fear losing, I can live without it, not just survive, but thrive." This doesn't mean you should permanently abandon all comforts and conveniences. The Stoics weren't advocating a life of constant hardship. Rather, they were suggesting that periodic voluntary discomfort creates the psychological freedom to enjoy comforts without being enslaved by them. I recently guided someone through this practice who had become dependent on expensive self-care rituals to manage her stress. Her voluntary discomfort experiment was to replace her costly spa treatments and classes with free alternatives for 1 month. Walks in nature instead of the gym, meditation instead of massage, home-cooked meals instead of restaurants. She discovered not only that she could save money, but that her well-being actually improved with these simpler approaches. The experiment revealed that what she had thought was necessary for her mental health was actually just a comfortable habit. Remember, the goal isn't to make yourself miserable. It's quite the opposite. It's to discover that your capacity for contentment is far less dependent on external circumstances than you've been led to believe. There's immense freedom in knowing you could lose certain comforts and still be fundamentally okay. Start small. Tomorrow morning, take a cold shower instead of a hot one. Eat a simple breakfast of plain oatmeal instead of your favorite cereal. Walk or take public transportation instead of driving or using a rideshare. These tiny voluntary discomforts begin to break the psychological dependency on constant comfort that makes involuntary discomforts so threatening. The Stoics believed that this practice was not just about individual resilience, but about freedom. As Seneca observed, to be everywhere is to be nowhere. When we become dependent on specific conditions for our happiness, we become trapped, unable to adapt, terrified of change, constantly anxious about potential losses. Voluntary discomfort practices break these chains, creating genuine autonomy. I found that most people who begin this practice discover something surprising. The anticipation of discomfort is usually far worse than the discomfort itself. We build up elaborate fears about what it would be like to go without our comforts, only to discover that the actual experience is entirely manageable. This insight alone can transform your relationship with anxiety. As you develop your practice of voluntary discomfort, remember that its purpose extends beyond personal resilience. The Stoics saw it as preparation for service. By reducing your own dependencies, you become more available to help others. When you're not constantly preoccupied with maintaining your comforts, you have more attention and energy for contributing beyond yourself. This practice of strengthening yourself through voluntary discomfort connects directly to another fundamental principle of Stoicism. While deprivation teaches us about our inner strength, there's a crucial element we often lose in our modern society: the perspective of time. When Seneca wrote his famous letter on the shortness of life, he revealed a shocking truth about how most people waste their most precious resource. The technique he proposed for reclaiming control of your time can literally make you feel like you've gained extra years of life. Have you ever felt that sudden panic that life is passing by too quickly? That sensation when you look at old photos and wonder where the time went? Or when you realize it's already the end of the year and you're not sure what you actually accomplished? This feeling isn't just a modern phenomenon. It troubled the ancients just as deeply. Seneca, who served as advisor to emperors and was one of Rome's wealthiest men, wrote a letter that still strikes at the heart of our modern anxiety. On the shortness of life might be the most important thing he ever wrote, and its central insight is as counterintuitive now as it was 2,000 years ago. It is not that we have a short time to live, Seneca observed, but that we waste much of it. Think about that for a moment. The problem isn't that we don't have enough time, it's that we squander what we have. Life is long enough, he continued, and it has been given in sufficiently generous measure to allow the accomplishment of the very greatest things if the whole of it is well invested. This reframes our entire relationship with time. Instead of victims of time's scarcity, we become stewards of its abundance. But to experience this abundance, we need to fundamentally change how we think about and use our hours. The Stoics developed a concept I find particularly powerful: the idea of borrowed time. Imagine waking up each morning with the perspective that today isn't guaranteed, but rather an unexpected bonus. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, at dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I am rising to do the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied if I'm going to do the things for which I exist? This perspective transforms ordinary moments into gifts. Your morning coffee isn't just another cup, it's one you weren't guaranteed to experience. That meeting isn't just another obligation, it's an opportunity you've been given that many would no longer have. Let's try a brief exercise right now. Close your eyes for just 10 seconds and imagine this is the last time you'll experience whatever you're doing right now. The last time you'll read these words, feel the temperature of the room you're in, hear the ambient sounds around you. Really lean into that perspective for just 10 seconds. Welcome back. Did you notice how that brief shift in perspective immediately changed your experience? This is what the Stoics called memento mori, remembering your mortality not as a morbid obsession, but as a clarifying lens that brings the present moment into sharp focus. But knowing time is precious isn't enough. We need practical methods to stop it from slipping away unnoticed. The first step is understanding where your time actually goes. I recommend what I call a time inventory. For just one typical day, track how you spend each hour. Be honest and specific. Most people are shocked to discover the gap between how they think they spend their time and how they actually spend it. When I guide people through this exercise, they frequently discover they spend 3 to 4 hours daily on social media, email, and other low-value activities, despite estimating about an hour. This awareness alone can be transformative. Seneca identified 3 categories of time that create our experience of life: past, present, and future. Of these, he observed that most people spend the least attention on the present, the only one actually within our control. The past is fixed and the future uncertain, yet we obsess over both while neglecting the moment we're actually living. This brings us to one of the most powerful Stoic insights about time. Mindful presence literally dilates your experience of time. Research from the University of Kent shows that people who practice present moment awareness consistently report that time feels more abundant. When you're fully engaged in what you're doing, whether it's a conversation, a meal, or even washing dishes, time slows down in your perception. Try this simple practice I call the Moments Journal. Each evening, write down 3 moments from the day when you were fully present. Not accomplishments or events, but moments of full engagement. The taste of your lunch, the feeling of the sun on your face during a walk, the sound of a loved one's laughter. This trains your brain to notice and value these moments as they occur. One client who struggled with perpetual time scarcity told me, after just 2 weeks of this practice, "I realized I've been rushing through a life I haven't actually been experiencing. When I started capturing these moments, I began looking for them throughout my day. Now I feel like my days are actually fuller, even though I'm doing less." This points to a profound paradox. By trying to do more, we often experience less. By slowing down to fully engage with fewer experiences, our lives feel richer and, in a meaningful sense, longer. But what about practical decision-making? How do we choose what deserves our limited time? The Stoics offered a powerful technique I call mortality-based decision-making. When facing a choice about how to spend your time, ask yourself, "On my deathbed, will this matter?" This single question cuts through the trivial and reveals what truly deserves your attention. Imagine you're considering whether to attend a social event you don't really want to go to, but feel obligated to attend. The mortality perspective immediately clarifies, will you regret missing this event when reflecting on your life as a whole? If not, why sacrifice precious hours to it? This approach transforms not just individual decisions, but entire calendars. I recommend a weekly practice called Stoic scheduling. Begin by identifying your core values and priorities, what truly matters in your life. Then review your calendar for the coming week and ask, does how I've allocated my time reflect these priorities? most people discover a shocking misalignment. One executive I worked with realized he was spending 40 hours weekly in meetings that didn't advance his most important work, while consistently postponing time with his family. The mortality perspective helped him implement a ruthless prioritization system, cutting his meeting time in half and creating protected family time that was non-negotiable. This brings us to another crucial Stoic insight: the ability to say no. Seneca observed that people are frugal in guarding their personal property, but as soon as it comes to squandering time, they are most wasteful of the one thing in which it is right to be stingy. Learning to decline commitments that don't serve your essential purpose isn't selfish. It's necessary stewardship of your most precious resource. A practical technique for developing this skill is what I call the not-to-do list. Rather than starting with what you want to accomplish, begin by identifying what you'll stop doing. What meetings can you decline? What obligations can you release? What relationships drain your energy without reciprocal value? Removing these creates space for what matters most. Underlying all these practices is the Stoic concept of memento mori, remember death. The Stoics would keep physical reminders of mortality not as morbid decorations, but as perspective-restoring tools. Modern equivalents might be setting a daily reminder asking, if this were my last year, how would I spend today? Or keeping a simple object that reminds you of life's finite nature. One powerful practice combines mortality awareness with gratitude. Each morning, say to yourself, I have been given another day that many were denied. How will I use this gift? This perspective transforms mundane mornings into precious opportunities and ordinary tasks into meaningful contributions. The Stoics would also regularly reflect on those who came before them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died, and the same thing happened to both. This cosmic perspective reminds us that time passes equally for everyone, emperors and ordinary citizens alike. The difference lies solely in how we use it. Time anxiety often stems from comparing our accomplishments to others. We see someone younger achieving more, or someone who seems to fit more into their days, and conclude we're behind or wasting time. The Stoic antidote is focusing on your own path and purpose. As Seneca wrote, what difference does it make how much is laid away in a man's safe or in his barns, how many head of stock he grazes, or how much capital he puts out at interest, if he is always after what is another's and only counts what he has yet to get, never what he has already? This leads us to a powerful daily practice for reclaiming time, the 3x3 exercise. Each day, spend 3 minutes in the morning planning your 3 most important tasks. Spend 3 minutes at midday reassessing and adjusting based on what's happened. Then spend 3 minutes in the evening reflecting on what you accomplished and what you learned. This simple 9-minute investment creates extraordinary returns in time well used. But perhaps the most transformative Stoic insight about time is this: the quality of time matters more than its quantity. An hour fully lived, with presence, purpose, and meaning, is worth more than days spent in distraction or anxiety. As Seneca noted, the life we receive is not short, but we make it so, nor do we have any lack of it, but are wasteful of it. What would change if you approached today as if it were borrowed time? If instead of saying, I have to do something, you shifted to, I get to? This subtle reframing acknowledges the privilege of having time at all. Try this simple awareness practice. Set a reminder that goes off 3 random times during your day with the question, am I fully here right now? This interrupts the autopilot that causes time to blur together and creates islands of presence in your day. Remember that the Stoics weren't advocating a frantic maximization of productivity. Quite the opposite. They valued leisure time for reflection, deep conversation, and contemplation. The difference was in how they engaged with this time, deliberately, appreciatively, fully. As we recognize the finite nature of our time, we are naturally led to a crucial question. What is this limited time for? What purpose should guide how we invest these precious hours? The Stoics had a surprisingly clear answer that contradicts much of what modern society teaches about success and happiness. When Marcus Aurelius wrote about the purpose of human life, he revealed a principle that can transform your sense of meaning and eliminate the existential anxiety so many of us feel. His insight wasn't about achievement or acquisition, but about something far more fundamental to our nature as human beings. Have you ever asked yourself, in the midst of your daily rush, is this really what I should be doing with my life? That nagging feeling that despite checking all the boxes, career, relationships, possessions, something essential might be missing. We chase promotions, scroll through social media, worry about what others think, all while that quiet voice inside wonders if we're somehow missing the point of our existence. This question troubled the ancients as much as it troubles us. But when Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and perhaps the most powerful man of his time, reflected on the purpose of human life, his answer was surprisingly simple. At the height of his power, with access to every luxury imaginable, he wrote in his private journal, "What is your vocation? To be a good human being. Not to accumulate wealth, not to gain fame, not even to achieve great things, but simply to express your human nature in its highest form." The Stoics called this living in accordance with nature, aligning your actions with your essential purpose as a human being. This isn't about camping in forests or rejecting technology. It's about recognizing what makes us truly human and orienting our lives around those qualities. Think about it this way. Just as a plant's nature is to grow towards sunlight and produce seeds, and a bird's nature is to fly and sing, what is your nature as a human being? What are you designed to do? The Stoics believed we are naturally rational, social beings meant to work together, solve problems, create value, and care for one another. When we live in alignment with these qualities, we experience what they called eudaimonia, genuine flourishing. This perspective creates a profound shift. Instead of measuring success by external markers, titles, possessions, followers, we begin to evaluate our lives by how well we express our essential human qualities. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "I am a human being." What is the skill proper to a human being? Kindness. Ooh, the contrast with our modern obsession with external success couldn't be starker. We've created a world where people sacrifice health, relationships, and meaning to climb ladders that often lead nowhere meaningful. The Stoics would look at our achievement-obsessed culture and ask, but what's the point of all this acquiring and becoming if it doesn't help you be more fully human? Let me introduce you to a powerful exercise I call the roles assessment. Take out a piece of paper right now and list the key roles you play in life. Perhaps parent, partner, professional, friend, citizen, creator. For each role, ask yourself, what would excellence look like in this role? Not perfection, but the best expression of my human nature. A father might write, being fully present when I'm with my children, teaching values through example, balancing guidance with allowing independence. A professional might note, creating genuine value, mentoring others, maintaining integrity even when costly. The specific answers matter less than the shift in perspective, from external metrics to the quality of your presence and contribution. Now, look at how you actually live each role day to day. Where are the gaps between your potential excellence and your current habits? This isn't about self-judgment, but about clarity. As Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. The beauty of this approach is that it works regardless of your circumstances. You don't need a particular job, relationship status, or living situation to express your human excellence. The prisoner can be as virtuous as the emperor, perhaps more so. This is precisely what made Stoicism so revolutionary. It placed the possibility of a good life within everyone's reach, not just the privileged few. But how do we know when we're living in alignment with our nature? The Stoics identified several signs. First, there's a sense of flow, that feeling when you're so engaged in meaningful activity that time seems to transform. Second, you feel a harmony between your actions and your deepest values. No cognitive dissonance or self-justification required. And third, you experience a kind of tranquility, even amid challenges, what the Stoics called apatheia. Not apathy, but freedom from destructive emotions. Conversely, there are clear signals when you're living out of alignment with your nature. Physical symptoms often appear first: chronic fatigue, tension headaches, digestive issues. Your body knows when you're betraying your deeper purpose. Emotional signs follow: persistent anxiety, boredom, irritability, or that vague sense of emptiness despite external success. And behaviorally, you might notice yourself seeking excessive distraction, numbing through substances, or constantly changing goals without satisfaction. I once worked with a client who had built a highly successful career in finance. On paper, everything looked perfect: prestigious position, excellent salary, beautiful apartment. But he was exhausted, disconnected from friends and family, and found himself drinking more each evening just to unwind. When we did the roles assessment, he realized he had completely abandoned key aspects of his humanity in pursuit of a narrow definition of success. His physical and emotional symptoms weren't random. They were signals that he had wandered far from his nature. The path to realignment began with a simple Stoic practice: the values clarification. I asked him, what would you do even if no one ever knew or paid you for it? This question cuts through social conditioning to reveal genuine internal motivation. For him, the surprising answer was teaching and mentoring others, something he had excelled at early in his career, but abandoned as he climbed the corporate ladder. This brings us to a powerful framework for decision-making based on the 4 Stoic virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. Before making any significant choice, ask yourself: wisdom. Is this decision based on clear thinking and good information? Justice. Is it fair to all concerned, including myself? Courage. Does it require me to overcome fear rather than be ruled by it? Temperance. Is it balanced and moderate rather than excessive? These questions develop what the Stoics called your inner citadel, a moral compass that guides decisions regardless of external pressures or changing circumstances. Unlike rigid rules that break under pressure, this virtue-based approach flexes to accommodate different situations while maintaining its essential structure. You can develop this inner compass through daily reflection. Take 5 minutes each evening to review your actions and ask, when did I express my human excellence today? When did I fall short? What would help me align more closely with my nature tomorrow? This practice, which Marcus Aurelius performed faithfully each night, gradually refines your intuitive sense of alignment. Another powerful exercise is the ideal self visualization. Spend 10 minutes imagining the person you most deeply admire, not their achievements or possessions, but their qualities. How do they treat others? How do they handle adversity? How do they use their time? Then ask yourself, what prevents me from expressing these same qualities today? The answers reveal your growth edges. One objection I often hear is, but what about my job? It feels meaningless. How can that align with my nature? The Stoics would offer a revolutionary perspective here. Any work, however humble, can become a venue for expressing human excellence. The question isn't what you do, but how you do it. Consider the person who cleans hospital rooms. Viewed merely as moving dirt from one place to another, this could seem meaningless. But seen as creating an environment where healing can happen, where patients feel respected, where infections don't spread, the same work becomes profound. The task hasn't changed, only the relationship to it. This perspective transforms even the most routine aspects of work. Answering emails becomes an opportunity to communicate with clarity and kindness. Meetings become chances to listen deeply and contribute meaningfully. Customer interactions become moments to practice patience and genuine service. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "In the morning, when you rise unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being." The daily practice of alignment is simple but transformative. Each morning, take 30 seconds to set an intention. Today, I will express my human excellence by... Be specific about how you'll bring your best qualities to your most important activities. Each evening, review how well you lived this intention and what you learned for tomorrow. I've seen remarkable transformations through this simple practice. People who had been going through the motions for years suddenly find renewed energy. Work that had felt meaningless takes on significance. Relationships deepen as people bring more of their authentic humanity to each interaction. One participant in my workshop realized she had been defining herself primarily through her career achievements. When asked what she would do if no one paid or recognized her, she discovered a deep desire to create beauty in everyday spaces, something she had abandoned years ago as impractical. By reintegrating this aspect of her nature into her daily life, not as a career but as an expression of her humanity, she experienced a profound shift in her sense of purpose and satisfaction. This brings us to an important clarification. Living according to your nature doesn't necessarily mean changing your external circumstances. Sometimes it does. If your current situation makes it impossible to express your essential human qualities. But often, the most powerful transformation comes from changing your relationship to your existing circumstances, finding ways to bring more wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance to the life you already have. The Stoics would also remind us that our purpose must extend beyond self-fulfillment. As inherently social beings, our nature finds its highest expression in contribution to others. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." Our individual flourishing is inextricably linked to the common good. This doesn't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of others' needs. Rather, it means recognizing that genuine fulfillment comes from finding the intersection between your gifts and the world's needs. The Stoics would have us ask not just, "What do I want to do?" but "What is needed, and how can my unique qualities serve that need?" Each day offers countless opportunities to express your human nature. When you listen fully to a colleague, rather than planning what you'll say next. When you choose integrity over convenience. When you face a difficult truth rather than hiding in comfortable illusion. When you forgive rather than harbor resentment. These aren't just nice things to do, they're expressions of what it means to be fully human. But living aligned with our nature faces a major obstacle in modern life. As we strive to express our authentic purpose, we constantly bump against the pressure to compare our journey with others. When Epictetus spoke about the danger of external opinions, he offered a revolutionary technique for freeing yourself from the prison of social approval. This practice can eliminate virtually all the social anxiety we experience and completely transform how you see yourself in relation to others. Imagine that you've just made a significant decision and someone criticizes your choice harshly. What happens inside you? That sudden tightness in your chest, the defensive thoughts rushing in, maybe even that impulse to justify yourself or counterattack. This reaction reveals something profound about human psychology, our deep vulnerability to others' opinions. Epictetus, who was born a slave and lived in physical bondage for years, offered one of history's most liberating insights. Make it your goal to become indifferent to what others think of you. Coming from someone who had no external freedom, this teaching carries extraordinary weight. Epictetus discovered that while his body was enslaved, his mind could remain entirely free if he mastered the art of indifference to external judgment. This doesn't mean becoming callous or dismissive of others. Rather, it means developing the ability to distinguish between useful feedback and mere opinion, between what Epictetus called impressions and judgments. An impression is the objective fact. Someone disagreed with my decision. A judgment is the meaning we attach to it. They think I'm incompetent, which means I might be. The key to mental freedom lies in the space between receiving an impression and accepting a judgment about it. The Stoics taught a technique I call the 3-second pause, that crucial moment when you can intercept an automatic reaction before it takes hold. When someone criticizes you, take 3 seconds before responding internally or externally. In that tiny space lives your freedom to choose your response rather than being driven by conditioning. Let me teach you a powerful exercise I call the tribunal of reason. When faced with an external opinion that disturbs your peace, subject it to these 4 questions. First, is this within my control? Often the answer is no. Others' opinions belong to them. Second, does this person have all the relevant information? Usually they don't. Third, is their opinion based on clear reasoning or emotional reaction? Frequently the latter. Fourth, even if their assessment were true, would it fundamentally change my worth? Never. Try this right now. Think of a recent criticism that bothered you. Take 15 seconds to run it through these 4 questions. Notice how the emotional charge begins to dissipate when subjected to rational examination. This practice transforms how you handle criticism at work. Instead of becoming defensive when your project is questioned, you can pause and ask, what part of this feedback contains useful information I can apply? This separates the actionable content from the emotional packaging it came in. One client who practiced this reported that her manager commented on her remarkable ability to receive difficult feedback constructively, a skill that accelerated her professional development. Social media presents a particularly challenging environment for maintaining independence from opinions. We're constantly exposed to both explicit judgments and implicit comparisons that can hijack our self-assessment. The Stoic approach offers a practical method. Use these platforms intentionally rather than reactively. Before engaging, set a clear purpose. I'm using this platform to share ideas, not to collect validation. Limit your time with a timer, and most importantly, practice what I call opinion fasting, periods where you deliberately abstain from checking likes, comments, or reactions. This breaks the neurological reward cycle that makes external validation so addictive. One of the most powerful Stoic practices for developing opinion independence is what I call the praise and insult exercise. Epictetus advised his students to receive both praise and criticism with the same equanimity. To say simply, that's one perspective, whether someone is complimenting or criticizing you. Try this. For one day, respond to all compliments with simple acknowledgement rather than pleasure or pride. Similarly, receive criticisms with curiosity rather than defensiveness. You'll notice something remarkable. Both positive and negative opinions begin to lose their emotional grip when you stop assigning them special significance. I witnessed this transformation with a client who suffered from severe social anxiety. Every interaction became a performance where she felt constantly judged. We began with tiny experiments, going to a cafe and making a simple request while focusing on the task rather than others' potential judgments. Gradually, she expanded to more challenging situations, always practicing the 3-second pause between impression and judgment. After 3 months, she reported a fundamental shift. I still notice when people might be judging me, but it doesn't control me anymore. I can choose which opinions deserve my attention and which don't. This wasn't just reduced anxiety, it was genuine freedom. A particularly valuable technique is what I call the observer exercise. When faced with a situation where others' opinions feel overwhelming, mentally step outside yourself and observe the scene as a neutral third party would. How would this observer describe what's happening without emotional investment? This creates psychological distance that allows for clearer perception. The Stoics believed we all possess what Marcus Aurelius called an inner citadel, a core self that remains inviolable regardless of external judgments. Developing this inner space requires regular withdrawal from social stimulation to reconnect with your own values and perspective. Even 5 minutes of quiet reflection each day helps maintain your psychological sovereignty. A simple but powerful question to ask when troubled by others' opinions is simply, so what? Follow the imagined consequences of someone thinking poorly of you to their logical conclusion. Most often, you'll discover that even the worst-case scenario, someone genuinely disliking or disapproving of you, has remarkably little real impact on your life. For example, if a colleague thinks your presentation wasn't good, so what? Perhaps they mention it to someone else. So what? Maybe that affects their opinion of your work temporarily. So what? When you follow this chain, you typically discover that the actual consequences are far less significant than the emotional weight you've assigned them. One of the most important skills is recognizing when you're seeking external validation unnecessarily. Watch for these warning signs: checking your phone repeatedly after posting something online, rehearsing what you'll say to impress others, making decisions based on what will look good rather than what feels right, or feeling anxious when you haven't received confirmation that someone approves of your choices. Each time you notice these patterns, it's an opportunity to practice what Epictetus called appropriate action, doing what aligns with your values, regardless of external reaction. This isn't about ignoring all feedback. It's about ensuring that others' opinions inform your decisions rather than control them. The practice of self-commendation is particularly important in developing independence from external validation. The Stoics regularly acknowledge their own virtuous actions, not from egotism, but to develop an internal barometer of worth. Each evening, take 30 seconds to acknowledge one action you took that expressed your values, regardless of whether anyone else noticed or approved. Remember that this independence doesn't happen overnight. Like any profound change, it develops through consistent practice in progressively more challenging situations. Begin with low-stakes scenarios, perhaps expressing an unpopular but harmless preference in a safe environment. As your opinion independence muscle strengthens, you can apply it in more significant areas. I often suggest starting with something as simple as ordering a meal you genuinely want rather than what you think others expect you to choose. Notice the subtle anxiety that might arise and practice letting it pass without changing your authentic preference. These small moments of alignment with your own judgment gradually build the confidence to maintain independence in more consequential decisions. The freedom this creates isn't just psychological, it's practical. When you're no longer driven by others' potential reactions, you make better decisions, take appropriate risks, and express yourself more authentically. One executive I worked with realized he had been making key business decisions based primarily on how they would be perceived rather than their actual merit. By practicing opinion independence, he not only felt more at peace, but actually improved his company's performance. This independence also transforms your relationships. When you're not constantly seeking approval, you can listen more deeply, disagree respectfully, and connect more authentically. Paradoxically, becoming less concerned with others' opinions often leads them to respect you more. as they sense your self-possession and integrity. A client who struggled with people-pleasing reported an unexpected result after practicing these techniques. Not only do I feel more free, but my relationships have actually improved. I'm more present with people because I'm not constantly calculating how to make them approve of me. I think they sense that authenticity. Remember that the goal isn't to become impervious to all external input. The Stoics recognize the value of constructive feedback and the natural human desire for connection. The aim is discernment, knowing which opinions deserve your attention and which don't. As Epictetus said, if anyone tells you that a certain person speaks ill of you, do not make excuses about what is said of you, but answer, "He was ignorant of my other faults, else he would not have mentioned these alone." This humor and perspective come from knowing that others' opinions reflect their limited perspective, not your inherent worth. You can appreciate the grain of truth in criticism without being defined by it. You can enjoy praise without becoming dependent on it. This balanced relationship with external judgment is the essence of Stoic freedom. As you develop this mental independence, you'll notice something remarkable. The energy you previously invested in managing others' perceptions becomes available for more meaningful pursuits. The mental space occupied by worry about judgment clears for creativity, connection, and purpose. Although the Stoics valued mental independence, they also recognized our fundamentally social nature. In fact, when Hierocles, a lesser-known Stoic philosopher, drew his famous circles of concern, he revealed a revolutionary technique for developing genuine compassion and transforming all your relationships. This simple exercise can heal family divisions, strengthen friendships, and even change how you view strangers. Have you noticed how naturally you care more about people close to you than strangers far away? When your child scrapes a knee, you feel it almost physically. When your best friend loses a job, you lose sleep worrying about them. But when you read about thousands suffering in a distant disaster, you might feel momentary sadness before continuing with your day. This isn't a moral failing, it's a natural feature of human psychology that the Stoics understood deeply. Hierocles, a Stoic philosopher whose work is less widely known than Marcus Aurelius or Seneca, created a powerful visual model that perfectly captures this aspect of human nature. He described our social connections as a series of concentric circles. At the center is the self. The next circle contains our immediate family. Then come extended family, friends, neighbors, fellow citizens, and finally, humanity as a whole. The closer the circle to the center, the stronger our natural concern. But Heracles didn't just describe this pattern. He prescribed a revolutionary practice. We should constantly work to pull the circles inward, gradually expanding our sphere of concern until we view even strangers with something approaching the care we naturally feel for those closest to us. As he put it, we should reduce the distance between ourselves and others. This captures a fascinating paradox in Stoic philosophy. While teaching the importance of emotional independence, the Stoics simultaneously emphasized our profound interconnection with others. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "We were born to work together like feet, hands, eyelids, and the upper and lower rows of teeth." The Stoics weren't advocating cold detachment. They were teaching a balanced approach where we care deeply for others while maintaining our internal center. Let me introduce you to a practice I call the connection meditation. Close your eyes right now and visualize these concentric circles around you. See the people in each circle, those you love most in the innermost rings, acquaintances further out, and unknown faces representing humanity in the outermost circle. Now imagine gently pulling those outer circles inward, reducing the distance between yourself and those who initially seemed distant or different. Take 15 seconds to really feel this expansion of concern. This practice might sound abstract, but its applications are remarkably practical, especially in healing family conflicts. When someone close to us behaves in ways we find difficult, our natural tendency is to focus exclusively on the behavior. The Stoic approach invites us to look beyond behavior to intention. As Epictetus advised, when someone seems to have injured you, immediately find in what way you yourself are at fault, and you will care about none of it. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for others' actions. It means recognizing that most harmful behavior stems from some form of misunderstanding or pain, not from deliberate malice. When your sibling says something hurtful, the Stoic question isn't, "How could they do this to me?" but, "What pain or fear might be driving this behavior?" Try this technique. The next time a family member frustrates you, pause and ask, what might they be trying to accomplish with this behavior? Perhaps they're seeking security, connection, or respect. Fundamental human needs we all share. This perspective shift doesn't excuse harmful actions, but it creates space for understanding rather than escalation. This approach proves equally powerful with difficult colleagues. I teach what I call the inner child exercise, a practice of momentarily seeing the child within the adult. When facing a particularly challenging coworker, take 3 seconds to imagine them as a 7-year-old child. How might their current behavior connect to early experiences or unmet needs? This brief visualization often dissolves immediate irritation and opens pathways to more constructive interaction. One participant in my workshop was struggling with an extremely critical team member who seemed impossible to please. After practicing this exercise daily for a week, she reported a significant shift. "I still see the problematic behavior, but now I also see the insecurity behind it. This person is terrified of making mistakes and projects that fear onto others. Understanding this doesn't make their criticism easier to hear, but it makes it much easier not to take personally." The Stoics also practiced what I call the view from above, mentally stepping back to see relationships from a cosmic perspective. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself to look at the stars and see yourself running alongside them. When relationship conflicts feel all-consuming, this wider lens restores proportion. Will this disagreement matter in 5 years? Would it even register in the context of our entire lives or the vast expanse of history? Take 5 seconds right now to apply this to a current relationship tension. Zoom out mentally until you can see not just the conflict but your entire life journey, and then further until you see the broad sweep of human history. Notice how this perspective shift immediately changes your emotional response. This cosmic view doesn't trivialize genuine relationship challenges. Rather, it helps distinguish between substantive issues worth addressing and minor frictions we can simply let go. As Seneca advised, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Most relationship tensions fall into this category, problems that exist primarily in our interpretation rather than objective reality. The real transformation in relationships comes from what I call the 3-question empathy practice. Before judging someone's actions, ask yourself, what might they know that I don't? What pressures or constraints might they be under? If I had lived their exact life, would I likely behave differently? These questions create a mental environment where understanding can flourish. One workshop participant applied this to a long-standing family rift. His estranged brother had made business decisions that seemed selfish and harmful. But after working through these questions, he realized his brother had been operating with information and pressures he hadn't fully appreciated. This didn't immediately repair the relationship, but it opened a door that had been firmly closed for years. Applying Stoic principles to relationships doesn't mean accepting toxic behavior. The Stoics were practical philosophers who understood the importance of boundaries. As Epictetus taught, some things are within our power, while others are not. In You cannot control another's behavior, but you can control your response, including whether to maintain certain relationships in their current form. The Stoic approach to truly difficult people balances compassion with pragmatism. Understand the roots of their behavior without becoming entangled in it, set clear boundaries without harboring resentment, and recognize when distance might be the wisest response. As Seneca noted, associate with people who are likely to improve you. The Stoics believed in universal human connection, but also in curating your immediate circle carefully. One of the most powerful relationship practices is what I call the other self technique. When someone's behavior frustrates you, ask, "Have I ever done something similar?" With honest reflection, the answer is almost always yes. Perhaps in different circumstances or to a different degree, but the same fundamental pattern. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil." This isn't cynicism, but recognition of our shared human nature. We all act from ignorance at times. We all prioritize our immediate needs over others. We all speak carelessly when stressed. Seeing your own capacity for similar behavior doesn't excuse others' actions, but it creates a foundation for genuine understanding rather than self-righteous judgment. The Stoics had a specific vision of ideal friendship, what they called virtuous friendship. Unlike connections based on utility, what someone can do for you, or pleasure, how they make you feel, virtuous friendships center on mutual growth in wisdom and character. As Seneca wrote, "The wise man will live as long as he ought, not as long as he can. And a friend is, in the first place, one's own self, then someone as much like oneself as possible." This view transforms how we choose and nurture friendships. Instead of asking what benefits you might receive, consider how the relationship helps both parties become better humans. The strongest friendships create space for mutual honesty, challenge, and growth. One friend who practiced this approach told me, "I've stopped counting text messages or who initiated the last hangout. Instead, I ask whether our interactions leave us both more thoughtful, more courageous, more measured. This completely changed which relationships I prioritize." To put these principles into daily practice, I recommend keeping what I call a kindness journal. Each evening, record one intentional act of drawing someone from an outer circle slightly inward, perhaps a meaningful conversation with an acquaintance, a moment of genuine interest in a colleague's life, or even a considerate interaction with a service worker. This practice gradually expands your sphere of active concern. Remember that the Stoic approach to relationships isn't about eliminating all conflicts or becoming unnaturally serene. It's about engaging with others from a place of wisdom rather than reactivity. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." His point wasn't to demonize others, but to prepare himself to respond with understanding rather than surprise or outrage. All these principles and practices converge toward a single goal, developing what the Stoics called oikeiosis, the recognition of others as fundamentally like ourselves, not identical, but sharing the same essential nature and basic needs. This recognition doesn't happen through intellectual agreement, but through consistent practice that gradually transforms how we perceive others. The beauty of the Stoic approach lies in its reciprocal benefits. By drawing others' circles closer to our center, we simultaneously expand our own circle outward. We become less isolated, less trapped in self-concern, more connected to the broader human community. As Seneca observed, "No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone and transforms everything into a question of his own utility." These principles of connection lead us to the culmination of Stoic philosophy. All the concepts we've explored, from internal control to universal connection, converge on a single ultimate goal: tranquility of mind, what the Stoics called ataraxia. When Seneca was exiled and lost everything, he applied a surprisingly simple daily practice that kept his inner peace intact. This exercise, which takes just 5 minutes daily, may be the most transformative technique in the entire Stoic arsenal. Imagine ending each day with a sense of complete peace, regardless of what happened. Not because everything went perfectly, but because you've developed a relationship with your experiences that transcends the usual roller coaster of reactions. This isn't fantasy. It's precisely what the ancient Stoics achieved through a simple practice that takes just 5 minutes each day. Seneca, who served as advisor to emperors and faced everything from exile to death sentences, developed what he called the examinatio, a nightly review that transformed how he processed each day's events. "When the light has been removed and my wife has fallen silent," he wrote, "I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by." This wasn't self-punishment or obsessive rumination. It was a structured reflection designed to extract wisdom from experience and prepare the mind for growth. The practice revolves around 3 fundamental questions. What did I do well today? What could I improve? How will I live tomorrow? These simple questions create a powerful framework for continuous improvement. Unlike modern productivity systems that focus solely on external achievements, the Stoic review addresses the quality of your responses to life, the only thing truly within your control. Think about your typical evening routine. Maybe you scroll through social media, watch shows, or fall exhausted into bed still mentally processing the day's events. What if instead you devoted just 5 minutes to this structured reflection? Not occasionally when you remember, but as consistently as brushing your teeth. The consistency of this practice matters more than its elaborateness. A simple daily review will transform your life more profoundly than occasional deep dives into philosophical contemplation. As Epictetus taught, don't just say you have read books. Show that through them you have learned to think better. Let me share a practical structure for what I call the 5-minute Stoic journal. First, find a quiet space where you won't be interrupted. Open a notebook or digital document and divide your reflection into 3 sections. In the first section, identify specific actions or responses that aligned with your values today. Perhaps you remained patient during a difficult conversation, maintained focus despite distractions, or showed kindness when it would have been easier not to. The key is specificity, not "I had a good day," but "When my colleague interrupted me in the meeting, I listened fully before responding." Next, identify areas for improvement, not with harsh self-judgment, but with the objectivity of a coach reviewing game film. "When my child was moving slowly this morning, I raised my voice unnecessarily. I procrastinated on that important task by checking email repeatedly." Note patterns without attachment or defensiveness. Finally, set specific intentions for tomorrow based on today's lessons. "When I feel the urge to interrupt, I'll take a breath first. I'll start the day with the most important task before opening email." These aren't vague aspirations, but concrete action plans grounded in recent experience. The power of this practice lies in its ability to transform mistakes from sources of shame into opportunities for growth. We often avoid examining our failures because it feels uncomfortable. The Stoic review changes our relationship with error, treating missteps as valuable data rather than moral failings. I remember working with a client who struggled with anxiety and self-criticism. When she first tried the evening review, she worried it would become another opportunity to berate herself for imperfections. Instead, she discovered something surprising. The structured nature of the practice actually reduced her rumination by giving clear boundaries to reflection. Before, I would replay mistakes in my head endlessly with no resolution, she told me. Now I identify the lesson, create a plan for next time, and actually feel complete. I sleep better because my mind isn't still trying to process unresolved experiences. This points to an important psychological dimension of the practice. Research shows that our brains have a completion bias. Unfinished tasks and unprocessed experiences consume mental energy and disrupt concentration. The evening review creates closure, freeing cognitive resources for rest and renewal. The practice also works by consolidating learning. Studies on skill acquisition reveal that reflection after practice dramatically improves retention compared to practice alone. By reviewing how you responded to challenges, you're essentially strengthening neural pathways for more effective future responses. Now, let's address a common concern. What if I had a terrible day? Won't reviewing it make me feel worse? This is where the Stoic approach proves particularly valuable. By focusing on your responses rather than events themselves, you maintain agency even when recalling difficult circumstances. A day filled with challenging events but good responses is a success from the Stoic perspective. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The evening review integrates beautifully with all the previous practices we've explored. Your awareness of what's within your control, your preparation for difficulties, your reframing of obstacles as opportunities, your simplified needs, your time perspective, your alignment with purpose, your independence from opinions, and your expansion of concern. All these elements find practical expression in this daily reflection. To make this maximally practical, let me suggest a 3-month progression that takes you from beginner to intermediate practitioner of Stoicism. In the first month, focus simply on consistency, establishing the daily review as a non-negotiable part of your evening routine. Keep it brief, perhaps just 2 minutes. The goal is making it sustainable rather than perfect. In the second month, deepen the practice by connecting it more explicitly to Stoic principles. For each situation you review, ask, did I distinguish between what I can and cannot control? Did I find opportunity in difficulty? Did I maintain independence from others' opinions? By the third month, you'll be ready to develop what the Stoics called a personal constitution, a set of guiding principles that emerge from your daily practice. These aren't imposed rules, but discovered values that reflect your highest understanding of how to live well. One participant in my workshop created a constitution with principles like, I will speak only when my words improve upon silence, and I will treat obstacles as opportunities to practice virtue. These weren't abstract ideals, but practical guidelines distilled from months of evening reflection on what actually created tranquility in his life. Remember that these practices must adapt to your specific life circumstances. The busy parent might practice the abbreviated version while putting children to bed. The executive with evening obligations might shift the review to lunchtime. The person struggling with insomnia might journal rather than mentally review to avoid stimulating the mind before sleep. As Seneca wisely noted, we should live according to nature, not against our individual needs and circumstances. The form can flex, while the essence remains. The path to what the Stoics called ataraxia, tranquility of mind, isn't mysterious or complicated. It doesn't require special knowledge or extraordinary circumstances. It requires only consistent practice of basic principles that align with human nature. How will you know you're making progress? Look for these signs. You'll find yourself less reactive to provocations that previously triggered strong emotions. You'll recover more quickly from setbacks that once would have derailed your entire day. You'll experience more frequent moments of genuine appreciation amid ordinary circumstances. You'll find it easier to maintain perspective during challenges, seeing them as temporary and limited. One of the most beautiful aspects of this practice is how it creates a positive cycle of growth. Better responses lead to better experiences, which lead to better material for reflection, which leads to better responses. As Marcus Aurelius observed, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The evening review isn't just a philosophical exercise, it's a practical tool for improving every aspect of life. Better decisions emerge from clearer thinking. Relationships improve through more considered responses. Work becomes more meaningful through intentional engagement. Even health benefits as stress diminishes through improved perspective. Consider creating community around these practices. While the evening review is personal, discussing insights with others multiplies their impact. You might find a Stoic buddy to share weekly reflections, join an online group of practitioners, or simply discuss principles with interested friends. Research on behavior change shows that shared commitment significantly increases consistency. As humans, we're naturally social learners. Epictetus recognized this when he created his school of philosophy, not as a place for abstract discussion, but as a community of practice. As we conclude our exploration of Stoic practices, I want to offer you a final commitment, what I call the 66-day transformation. Research on habit formation suggests it takes approximately 66 days for a new practice to become automatic. Commit to your daily review for this period, tracking your consistency on a calendar or app. The first few weeks may require deliberate effort and reminders, but gradually, the practice will shift from obligation to necessity, something you rely on for psychological equilibrium just as you rely on sleep for physical restoration. We began our journey with that universal moment of resistance when your alarm sounds in the morning, and we end with a complete philosophy for living. The Stoics show us that true transformation doesn't come from superficial techniques, but from a fundamental shift in how we view the world and our place in it. As Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you respond to it that matters." By practicing these principles daily, you don't just change your mornings, you transform your entire life. The choice now lies in your hands. Continue as before, or begin your Stoic revolution today. Remember that the Stoics weren't superhuman. They were real people who faced the same challenges we face: anxiety, disappointment, loss, confusion. What distinguished them was their commitment to practicing a better way of responding to life's inevitable difficulties. The evening review isn't just another item on your to-do list. It's a daily appointment with your best self, a chance to align your actions with your deepest values and continuously refine your responses to life. As Seneca reminds us, life is long if you know how to use it. The evening review ensures that each day contributes to a life well lived, regardless of external circumstances. Begin tonight. Take 5 minutes before sleep to review your day through the Stoic lens. What did you do well? Where could you improve? How will you live tomorrow? This simple practice, maintained consistently, contains the power to transform not just your days, but your entire experience of being alive.